Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Saul Gomez of the United States Navy, and in particular the United States Navy Reserves, and a little bit of talk about how innovation is proceeding over there and the incredible work they've been doing in an individual, a team, and a distributed basis. Saul, you're on mute. I'm just going to highlight that for you, and then I'm going to turn it right back over to you, brother.
All right, so good afternoon, good day, everybody. Thanks for having me here. And I'll get straight to the point. And I'll give you a little bit about myself as it kind of ties into my current role in the innovative environment that it thrives in. So I started off as an engineer in the Navy and spent most of my career in the expeditionary community. And sometime around the 15, 16-year mark, I transitioned over to the HR world, specifically in the reserve staff and headquarters community, which, you know, culture change and culture shock is an understatement. But it was an interesting transition. I worked in the HR field, did some EO stuff for a while, and then I found myself where I'm at now in the strategy, innovation, inclusion, diversity spaces, where I was introduced to some phenomenal people like Bobby Hamby, John Ware, and, you know, as of late, Centers for Adaptive Warfighting and all the bright minds that are there. And I can tell you that journey had its share of peaks and valleys, and I cherish it, all of it, because it's truly been exciting, and I feel honored to have this opportunity to share with you about innovation in the Navy Reserves. And real quick, right, so a lot of people talk about innovation as being a buzzword, and according to Merriam-Webster, innovation is a new idea, method, or device. And we can say that innovation refers to something new or a change made to an existing product, idea, or field. For example, we can say that the first telephone was an invention, and the first cellular telephone was either an invention or an innovation to the original phone. And we can, I'm sure, agree that the first smartphone is an innovation to the cellular phone. So hopefully that kind of makes sense and it gives you some context. In the reserves, I would have to say that innovation is something we're inherently doing. We've done it. We've just either not realized it or called it that. And beyond that, in the military at large, I think we simply just get stuff done. And we find creative ways to do that. I would also say that in the Navy, as a Navy Reserve person, or FTS, full-time support as they call us, we're charged with not only knowing our field of expertise within our job, or whether it's a rate or MOS or whatever our job is, or billet designator, but also be able to be a Native Reserve speaker, whether it's policy, programs, orders, pay, the gambit of things that Navy Reserves go through to be able to make them operationally and contribute to the, you know, total force integration to the active component. The FTS community is duly charged with being expert reserve support personnel, and rightfully so. The reservists are our mission, and getting them to, you know, out downrange and doing the job that they do is our mission. So I say all that to say that we're in a constant state of change and adaptation, which kind of lends itself to being able to make these decisions and just kind of adapt ourselves and do what we need to be doing, and just really finding different ways of skinning the proverbial cat, if that makes sense. I'll talk about 5 examples that stand out to me that kind of highlight not only the capability that we have in the reserves, but the immense talent pool that we have in our collective reserve community, and of course, what innovation looks like for us. So one, we've been very successful. John Hawley was kind of the father of the Illuminate workshops that kind of lends itself to design thinking, and Bobby Hamby was a great mentor and friend. So these think shops, which are basically design thinking workshops, we've been very successful at introducing them and incorporating them into our in-doc or onboarding process for our new personnel. We give them a one-day introduction to design thinking to kind of get them in that methodology and that mindset to kind of plant the seed. So as they transition into their work environments, they have that innovative, that creative, that divergent thinking type of mentality, so they can start asking those thought-provoking questions as they check on board. We've so far put over 200 personnel through our Think Shop workshops, and hope to get to a tipping point at some point where there's enough personnel who can organically create the appetite for more design thinking and really scaling that within the organizations. Historically, in my shop, which is the N5 shop, we've typically been the belly button for innovation, and, you know, we're the innovation guys. And in my role as inclusion and diversity, the squishy stuff guy. So we're trying to really bring that outside of that and just really grow that capability within our organization. So that's been really successful, and I'm just excited to see how far we can take that. Another one is how we leverage our personnel. And I'll give you 2 quick stories. We have an 04 lieutenant commander who works for PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. He's a supply officer by trade and a submariner. And what's he doing in the strategy, innovation, plans, and policy shop? Well, in a civilian capacity, he's a great big data analytics type of guy, and he's helping us a lot build CRM platforms to the point where he's been able to build a CRM interface that provides us dashboards with a lot of great data, which, he's captured all of our reserve UX, where they serve, who they kind of connect to, so that we can better leverage their skill sets throughout the globe and how we contribute to the total force, in the active component. So that's been huge. So, we take his civilian skill sets and we leverage the heck out of them. Great guy to have. Another one is an MA2 and E5 military police officer. What's he doing in the manpower shop, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, great, we can put him on the gate, he can stand gate guard, and he's one of the bodies. And we're like, no, we're bringing him on board so they can help the HRIS system, the Human Resource Information System. He's a code writer in a civilian capacity. So we're able to bring him on board, and that's what he does for the manpower shop. And he's doing a lot of great things. And I tell these two stories in particular to kind of highlight the scope the lens that we try to look at our personnel, not just what they wear on their collar in terms of their rank and what their job is in the military, but what else do they bring to the table in terms of their civilian capacities. And so it's a beautiful thing, and it's a great capability to have. Another thing that we do are what we call design blitzes. We've done them for medical processes, pay, and as of late, distributor mobilization. I'll talk about the medical and pay, and particularly the pay. There were a lot of pay points in terms of how we mobilize and demobilize our reserve personnel. And what we're able to do is bring all the stakeholders together to kind of have a conversation about what sucks, and then really get after those things, and using design thinking methodologies, really get after finding solutions to these otherwise complex problems that we typically try to solve in silos, and really looked at from a macro level perspective where our pain points were and how we can leverage each other's resources to try and really solve some of these sometimes very trivial issues. We just don't necessarily ask the questions because we're so focused in what we do individually that in the collective, we're not realizing how many missed opportunities we have. So we've been very successful in mitigating a lot of pay gaps for our reservists, which, we don't want to have reservists out there downrange doing the job, worried about whether they're getting paid or not. So those have been very successful, and there's an appetite to continue to have those. Another example is the COVID-19, right? We've got a lot of flexibility. Our Chief of Naval Reserve, Vice Admiral McCollum, has really pushed forward to leverage our capabilities, whether it's teleworking, drill flexibility, and just really making it easier and sustainable for our reservists to do what they do, while also keeping in mind our active duty staff that does the job to telework as much as possible and really leverage our capabilities, specifically with our N6 shop. We have a great deal of folks there that do a lot of great things. And to that point, as unfortunate as the environment that we're in right now, it's a really great opportunity to really learn where some pain points are and really kind of show us where our strengths are in terms of, remotely functioning and being operationally ready. Another thing that I really want to touch on is somebody mentioned about ideas and how we can socialize them. So for the Navy Reserve, we've created this idea portal. It's r2w.navy.mil. It's a Mill Suite site where anybody and everybody can contribute ideas, and we filter those, we vet those to the appropriate subject matter experts. And if they're policy driven, we kick those over to our Navy Reserve Policy Board. If it's within the Chief of Navy Reserve's cognizance to make those changes, and if higher, we'll kick it up to the National Navy Reserve Policy Board where we can potentially make OPNAV changes. Those are just kind of some things that we're doing in the Navy Reserves to really bolster and leverage our capabilities. And I would say that it starts with intrinsic motivation. And in the Navy Reserve community, as I stated, whether it's a reservist or full-time support personnel, it's inherent to what we do. We're constantly adapting, changing, making things happen. And that intrinsic motivation causes sparks that create a momentous inertia that fuels momentum, compounds, combusts into a ball of fire, and before you know it, we're propelling forward. And I think I just kind of described part of the internal combustion engine cycle. That's the engineer in me, but I apologize for that. My point being, it starts with self and the environment. When the environment is welcoming to divergent thinking or spitballing to see what sticks, we can start to build an infectious and an extrinsic motivation that enables an organization to really leverage the heck out of its talent pool. Again, I believe we already do that in the collectives. we're solutions oriented. But when we add the methodology of the Centers for Adaptive Warfighting, whether it's design thinking, the Scrum, or the Mission Accelerator course, we're really able to tap into all of the pockets of creativity, best practices, and really bolster the ability to build cross-functional teams to leverage each other's capabilities and resources, not just in the Navy Reserves, but across, you know, the different domains in the joint environment. All that said, I run into people all the time, and they say, well, sounds like you're doing Lean Six Sigma. Well, I think we do affect processes, but I think the emphasis is on people. How do we bring people together in a collective environment where everybody feels safe to contribute and provide their feedback, regardless whether you're the E1 or the O10? Everybody has an equal share, an equal stake, an equal dog in the fight, and everybody can contribute. And there are no bad ideas. There are some maybe ideas that are very divergent, and as we convert and kind of get into scalable and feasible solutions, we can kind of start teasing those out and figuring out where our bright ideas are, because it takes a lot of crazy, just abstract ideas that lend themselves to those bright ideas. So I think there's something to be said about having those environments where people feel safe to contribute. And when we can be inclusive of our diversity, of the diversity of thought, we're really able to get the most out of our assets, which is our people. And I would submit that these inclusive environments are needed to exist so that innovation can thrive. And I think this kind of takes me to my role as Inclusion and Diversity Officer in the Navy Reserve Force, where part of my effort is, well, you know, when we think about inclusion and diversity, what does that mean? How do you operationalize it? And I think this kind of dovetails and marries very well with what the Centers for Adaptive Warfighting does, because it kind of brings in the inclusion of diversity and the diversity of thought to build these collaborative environments where we can really thrive and get after complex problems. I would argue that this really enables us to be more effective in how we respond versus react to things. And one of the things that I kind of look towards, I've known about it, but it was recently reintroduced to me by some very smart and talented people, is the TED, or the empowerment dynamic, which is a concept that I've seen before, like I said, but was reintroduced to me recently. And it really highlights the benefits and innovation that innovation and connectiveness and inclusivity brings. Within the TED, the empowerment dynamic, there's a creator, the coach, and the challenger, and they kind of form a triangle to really support and assist questions and ideas, and then challenges, you know, growth and learning, and provokes action. And also there's an element that, you know, of the creator, where it owns the power to choose and respond to things that are needed to get done, whatever the issue may be. So what are we doing now? Right now in the Navy Reserves, we were going to be doing a distributed mobilization blitz workshop, but you know, obviously it got postponed for obvious reason. So we have that in the pipeline and that what that's about is how do we mobilize our personnel more effectively in a manner that we can readily provide reserve force to the active component whenever, wherever they need it. That's not only going to bring the warfighter to the fight, but also take care of their, you know, their administrative needs, their, you know, healthcare, their pay, all that other stuff that sometimes there's some pain points, existing pain points. The other thing, which is kind of a long-term effort, is to scale that capability of design thinking and just really being divergent in our way of thinking to solve complex problems within our organization, and really scale that out to our echelon 4 organizations, our regional organizations. The Navy Reserve in particular is very well geographically postured in the various regions, whether it's the Northwest, Southwest, Southeast, Mid-Atlantic regions, and even in some of the mid-states, where the echelon 4, having that capability there, really enable us to be more collaborative with, whether it's Air Force assets, Army assets, you know, wherever those are, where we can really scale and leverage those capabilities, especially with our reserve personnel who have civilian skills and capabilities that we're really not always thinking about. So, of course, this effort is pre-decisional, but it's really a testament of our very much divergent thinking, and just the overarching effort is to scale and sustain within the Navy Reserves, and then, you know, share those best practices with our partners. So I've said a lot. I'm standing by for any questions or comments.
In which we are rich. Man, you covered a lot of ground there. I'm prepared to allocate a lot of points, moral and otherwise, for having fit in the internal combustion engine cycle as you went. My respect, my friend. One question here is from Beth Davis, involving many in the solving of problems. Did you see greater ownership and engagement in the solution on pay versus compliance?
Pay versus compliance?
Yeah, and Beth, if you'd like to narrow in on your question a little bit in the comments there, we're happy to, or just throw another one up. We're happy to expand. As we wait for that, Matt Murphy's pointing out that it's really helpful to have modern case studies to highlight successes and failures relative to promoting and leveraging innovation. I think Colonel Lyons was suggesting before that people look for different things across the innovation curve when they think about whether or not to adapt to something. And the idea that some people are willing just because it's new and other people need something to look at to know that there's precedent. And also for each of us in each of our communities, to your point about diversity and inclusion, to be able to say, that person has some experience similar to mine, is in my military occupational specialty or my designator, or works at a unit like mine, or in the reserves, or on active duty, or took that from the private sector and was able to bring it here, and it makes more sense that way. Have case studies been really powerful to you in helping to spread the gospel here?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think metrics is something that we really need to look at hard, because I think that's where the rubber meets the road, right? It's show me the money, show me the metrics. What does the data tell us? We're a very data-driven community, and I think there's merit in that. To answer Beth Davis's question, I think the ownership, I think our personnel, not just our full-time support, but our reservists that, raise their hand and answer the call to get mobilized. I don't think it's more of a compliance. They do it out of their sheer willingness to serve. In terms of solutions on pay versus compliance, I think there are some compliance frameworks in there that kind of direct us on how we need to process these reservists into an active duty status so that they can get their pay and benefits. We do have some flexibility, but I think the aperture needs to be wide, and that's what we need to look at what the laws say in terms of how do we transition civilians that are service members into an active duty, ensure that they're getting paid while making sure that we're preserving also their civilian status. And that's kind of where USERRA and ESGR, the employee support of the Guard and Reserve, kind of comes in to help liaison and narrow some of those gaps and some of that gray area that sometimes comes up when we have our reservists roger up for deployments. So I think the ownership is in, what is the objective? Is getting our reservists downrange to do the mission. And with the understanding that we don't want there to be any concern with regards to whether or not they're going to be able to, get paid. Can they pay the bills? Can their families go to TRICARE? Are they good to go? We want to be able to remove that concern out of their minds so they can focus on the task at hand, which is getting downrange and doing the job. Hope
yeah,
that answers
100%. And because we have to switch over to Matt shortly here, maybe we can just hit this one in passing. Circling back to Beth's question, I think you actually transitioned really neatly to it here. To whether the sort of co-designing in the process is really important to people's feelings of justice and ownership, right? She's talking about the pay choices as something they could take ownership of versus just having to comply with it because they were told to on the pay stuff. But understanding the reasons and developing trust in the pay structure because of inclusion in the decision and the process of arriving at it. Sounds like that was pretty important.
Absolutely.
Beautiful thing. Matt Audette, are you with us?